evening, everyone. Again, we will start as usual with a short breathing exercise to quiet our mind by watching your breath mindfully for a few moments. So then we can try to think and contemplate that even though we cannot remember clearly, or we don't remember even unclearly, or we don't remember at all, but all sentient beings has been our most kind mother, father, sibling, grandparents, and a friend many times in the past. And especially they have been our most kind mother so many times. Each time they were our most kind mother, they did so much for us. Especially when we are most vulnerable, when we cannot take care of ourselves, totally depending on others. Our parents, especially the mother, took care of us. And gave and did everything she could to bring us, to make us happy. And it is because of their kindness that we are still here now. And physically in good conditions. And according to their best capacity, according to their best skillful means, wisdom and compassion. They try to provide us the best in everything they could provide. So therefore, now we have this precious human life, met the Dharma, and have little understanding of that. It will be improper and incorrect not to repair the kindness. And totally ignore their well-being is improper, incorrect. not only from the Dharma point of view, even from a worldly point of view. And in order to repay the kindness, there are so many different ways of repaying the kindness. The best way to repay the kindness is to help them to free from their own delusions, defilements, which are the cause of the suffering and samsara. And lead them to true lasting happiness. There's nothing more better way to repay the kindness than to be able to do that. And in order to help them to free from all the defilements and lead them to true happiness, we ourselves need to be free from the defilements, and we ourselves need to be enlightened in order to be more benefit to do that. And in order to achieve fully enlightenment, we need to practice, meditate correctly, continuously. And cultivate highest level of the bodhicitta mind and wisdom, realizing the ultimate truth. And in order to practice correctly, continuously, we need to be reminded of the practices, and study, learn about the practices. For that very reason, that is why we are here, so that we can be reminded, get maybe some inspiration, some encouragement to practice. And may our act of coming here together with good intention, motivations, become cause and condition for fully enlightenment, so we can be the greatest help and benefit to each and every sentient beings, effortlessly. Okay.
Page 73, we'll do the first verse once. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go.
So we are on, in terms of the telescope, we are on great scope. And in that, we are at the way how to cultivate the bodhicitta mind, and by following two different methods. One, the seven point of cause and effect, and equalizing exchange and set with others. Within that, we are on the first method of the practice, meditations. And within that, whatever method we use to cultivate our waking mind of bodhicitta, in order to have a unbiased and non-discriminating love and compassion, which is the very root cause of the bodhicitta mind, we need to have a good foundation equanimity. Without a good foundation equanimity, if we have a attachment to a certain individual and anger to a certain individual, then we cannot cultivate impartial, non-discriminating loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, because and so therefore, first we need to have the foundation of equanimity. On the basis of the equanimity, and then when last we're recognizing all sentient beings being your most kind mother, not only most kind mother, but many times. And then having recognized, and of course, as as I mentioned, and as many others commentaries and lamas also mentioned, if someone has difficulty with to feel the kindness of their mother, then they shouldn't be kind of stuck there. They should think someone, maybe they can feel more connected, whether it can be father, it can be your sibling, it can be your grandparent, it can be your friend, whoever in this life you feel strongly connected and feel kindness of them. So you think of them and thinking everyone has been like that, whether it's a grandparent, whether it's whoever you connect. So you don't have to force yourself if you don't, your mind is unable to feel that. Do you get it? And that is, again, it's very important, I think, in our practice meditations, sometimes we force ourselves, and then it makes things more struggles. And so when we have struggled with something, then you can be gentle, and then we can just kind of shift the object, something else where we can feel more easily that. But so anyway, but for most people, most kind is the mother, If there is anyone who is most kind, then it is the mother. And so is the ultimate kind of object of someone who showed the most unconditional compassions, love. So recognizing all sentient beings as being a mother, and then remembering their kindness. And again, sometimes it takes time to remember the kindness, because it doesn't come, we have forgotten a lot of their kindness, especially when you are young, until you start to recollect them, until you start to write them one by one. For some people, maybe at the very beginning, maybe they cannot think of kindness, even few kindness, because our mind, sometimes because we have certain issue that we have built up over the time, and because there is bitterness, you know, because we have certain bitterness because of certain circumstances, conditions, and there is still a lot of bitterness, anger, and those. And when we have that, then it kind of blind us, and our mind is closed. When our mind is closed, then even it is in front of you, sometimes we cannot see it, you know. And so therefore, for some people, when they have that kind of relationship with that kind of bitterness and anger and that, sometimes it is not easy to remember their kindness. But if we started to let go of those bitterness, and if we are able to let go of those anger, and then our mind become more open, then you are able to remember, see. Sometimes we remember, but then we interpret differently, you know. We interpret that kindness as something else. And when your mind is more open, when you don't have so much bitterness and anger, then you are able to see their actions differently and see their compassionate act. And through that, anyway, through that kind of reflection, contemplation, and we try to remember their kindness, you know. And then having remembered the kindness, then next is cultivating the wish to repay the kindness. And if we can really feel the kindness, then that the wish to repay the kindness will come quite naturally, as it is said in all those Lam-Rims, you know. And then when we have this strong thoughts or attitude, wish to repay the kindness, then what is the best way to repay the kindness? And, you know, giving the happiness of samsara, you know, through that we can pay kindness, but still it's not the best way of repaying kindness. They already have all samsaric pleasure many times, so many times. And that is not the best. So the best way to repay the kindness is to free them totally from all the suffering, samsara. And that means helping them to free from their own defilements and contaminated karma. And lead them to the ultimate happiness of non-abiding liberations, you know. And so cultivating that, which I think maybe we finish up to that, yeah. And I think I brought the wrong book, so I need someone's need to. Yeah. So it is on page, and where it says the meditation loving, the actual generation of mind starving to the welfare of others. How to meditate on essential points separately. I think, did we finish that? Okay. So in the Shantideva's compendium of the training, it says, incense with the inflections, blinded by the ignorance, on a path with many abysses, stumbling with every step, myself and others are always basis of sorrow, being are same in sufferings. In the view of this, so Lama Tsongkhapa said, although it is indeed said to be inappropriate to look for faults in others, normally that in all, you know, in all Lojong practices, you always says, don't look for the faults of others, you know, look for the good qualities of others, you know. And so even though that, although you should marvel at the slightest positive quality when you see in any sentient beings, you know, here it is appropriate to relate with the miseries. Here, the point is to cultivate loving kindness and compassion And so the more you feel their loving kindness and you see their pain and suffering, the more easier it is to us to cultivate compassion. The more you see lack of happiness, the more easier it is to cultivate the love. And so therefore, intentionally, you try to see and feel their loving kind, their suffering, pain and sufferings. Not only pain and suffering, also the cause of that pain and suffering, you know, the delusion, the afflictive emotions, you know. And so when you see someone's, let's say someone's problems with, let's say, attachments, kind of, you know, lust, possessiveness, strong, or someone having a problem with anger, or someone having a problem with the ignorance, someone having a problem with jealousies, someone having a problem with a kind of arrogance, pride, selfish, very strong selfishness. So, you know, so while we see that, but instead of using that to get angry towards because of that, we use that as to cultivate compassion. So you can use, by seeing that of someone's afflictive emotions, whatever that afflictive emotion might be, either it can lead us to be very angry with that person because you think of that person as such a selfish person, that person is such an arrogant person, that person is such an ignorant. It can make us to be very angry and upset, or it can become a cause and condition to cultivate more compassion. And so here we utilize that, and by seeing, because of those delusions, how much they're suffering immediately, you know. Because of those delusions, because of those afflictive emotions, how much they are suffering emotionally, mentally now. And relating that afflictive emotions and the result of that, their suffering and pain. And not only that, then, you know, due to those kind of afflictive emotions and defilements, and engaging in such a harmful actions, unvirtuous actions, then they will also suffer also in the futures. So they are creating cause and conditions to create more suffering in the futures, as well as the emotional suffering because of those negative emotions. And so if we can really relate those negative emotions with their suffering, their pain, immediate suffering, pain, and future pain and sufferings, then you might be able to feel compassion for them. If we cannot relate that with their suffering, then maybe it's, instead of compassion, we might be very upset and angry, you know. And so I think that is important kind of point that from here we can learn. And then coming to that, the actual generation, mind striving for welfare of others, loving kindness, compassion, and special attitudes. So here, the second has 3 points: meditating on love, so loving kindness, okay, meditating on compassion, and meditating on extraordinary attitude. And then first, meditating on love. First, the object. So here, when we talk about here love or loving kindness, is not same as ordinary love. Okay, we have to really understand. Ordinary love is attachment. Ordinary love is attachment. Ordinary love, which is attachment, has always more, is more about yourself, you know. I love someone because he or she give me satisfactions, joy, happiness. The moment I feel he or she doesn't give me any kind of satisfaction, joy, happiness, my love is gone. That kind of love. Mm. Mm. And that ordinary love has a lot of condition, expectations, you know. Whereas the loving kindness that here, that it explaining that we need to cultivate is without any attachments and without any conditions and without any expectations. So I just wanted to kind of, because we see the same word, love, but it's a very different state of mind. Okay. So the object of love or loving kindness is sentient beings who do not possess happiness, who lack happiness, you know, and who does not have happiness, who lack happiness, and that means many different levels of happiness, you know. Sometimes someone lacks the happiness of healthy, good health. Someone lacks happiness of healthy relationship. Someone lacks happiness of, you know, feeling being cared, loved. Someone lacks happiness of, you know, financial stabilities. Someone lacks happiness of, so there are many kind of samsaric level of happiness, and as well as the happiness of liberations, the happiness of fully enlightenment, you know. So those who lack any of those happiness, any samsaric or beyond samsaric happiness, those are the object of the loving kindness. And it is the aspect of the mind is the thought, how wonderful it would be if they were to meet with happiness. May they meet with happiness, and I will make them meet the happiness. So cultivating a strong attitude, you know, how wonderful it would be if they have a happiness or good health. How wonderful it would be if they have happiness or good relationship. How wonderful it would be if they have a happiness of financial stability. How wonderful it would be if they have happiness of feeling being loved, care. How wonderful it would be if they have happiness of higher rebirth. How wonderful it would be if they have happiness of liberations, nirvana. How wonderful it would be if they have happiness of fully enlightenment, you know. So we can relate with particular happiness someone struggles, you know, immediately, samsaric happiness that they struggles, and then the happiness of liberation and fully enlightenment. And then, so cultivating this strong, sincerely, genuine feeling, how wonderful it would be if they have those happiness. And then even more cultivating, even stronger, cultivating that attitude, that mind strongly, may they have those happiness and causes of happiness. You know, not only how wonderful it will be, but may they have happiness and causes of happiness. Is even more stronger. And then as you build even more strongly, may I be able to lead them to those kind of happiness and cause of happiness. You know, not only wishing them to have such happiness and cause of happiness, but even more stronger that I myself will lead them to such happiness and cause of happiness. And sometime in some others prayer, practice, then Guru Deity, please bless me to be able to do that. So, so it is a big job. It's a not easy job, First, to create happiness for ourselves is a big, that is self struggle, really trying to find happiness for ourselves. And then trying to help someone to find happiness, lead to happiness. And one individual is not easy, and then all sentient beings, definitely. And so therefore we require all the help, all the blessings, for the success of such practice. And so we request our Gurus, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, all the holy beings to bless, to guide us, to inspire us, to give us courageous confidence, so that we can lead all sentient beings to happiness and cause of happiness. And so, so that that is how we try to think, And in order to cultivate that strong attitude of loving kindness, the more you understand the benefit of that loving kindness attitude, the more you will be inspired to cultivate that. Okay, the more benefit you see, the more you will be inspired to cultivate that. If you don't see benefit, then you will be not so inspired to cultivate that. And so therefore, here explaining some benefit of the loving kindness attitude. As regard to the advantage or benefit, it says in the King of the Concentration Sutta, many kinds of offering without measure, in myriads of neighboring pure field, constantly offered to the most excellent beings, fall short of fractions of the mind of love. And so here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, this is to say that merit of the merit is much greater, even 1 second of cultivating loving kindness, even one moment of cultivating a loving kindness attitude is much greater than that of constantly making offering to the field that is the final objects, that is the Buddhas with the vast things, So in terms of the objects, the object of offering is the Buddhas. In terms of the offering that we are making is incredible, precious, countless, and to countless Buddha, even we make them incredible virtues and merit we create. But cultivating a moment of loving kindness attitude is even more, we create even greater merit and greater virtues than even that. And so also in the area of quality of Manjushri Buddha realms is explained in the world sphere called ornament by thousands of the great kings. Buddhist Vara in the northeastern quarter, sentient beings possess a happiness similar to the happiness of fully ordained monks. I think probably fully ordained monks means the arhat, sometime okay, who have inter-cessation, so yeah, who have achieved nirvana, If a mind of love towards all sentient beings generated in this field for as little as duration of finger snap produce far more merit than someone celebrate practicing pure contact there for 100,000 millions of years. what need is there to mention the abiding in the mind day and night. So similar kind of quotations that you find in different sutras that where, just a moment of cultivating the loving kindness, overwhelm and suppress all the merit that we create by making offerings to such holy object, or by keeping the pure morality for such long amount, thousands of years, millions of years, And in Nagarjuna Precious Garland, we also find 300 pots of food one give. So in terms of food, not just one portion, but 300s, and gives 3 times, not only one time, but 3 times, not only one day, every day, falls short of the merit of love maintained for the duration of just one moment. You are loved by gods and humans. They protect you as well, and you have a mental happiness. You have mental happiness and much happiness. Poison and weapons can do no more harm. You achieve your goal without effort, because you create so much merit. And when you have merit, everything's become easy. We struggle to achieve a lot of things in our life because we don't have enough support of the merit. And we'll be born in the world of the Brahma, and even if you do not reach liberation, you will win the 8 qualities of love. So here Lama Tsongkhapa explaining. So if we have that, if you have love, loving kindness, you are loved by gods and human beings, and they naturally gather around you. And again, we cannot see the God, but at least if you have loving kindness, we can see whether it's human beings or whether it's animals, they are attracted to you. Even you can see whether it's a cat, whether it's a horse, whether it's a dog, whatever, they're all like someone who loves them, They can feel the energy of loving kindness, love, and they feel attracted and gather around them. And also human beings are like that, we all like to be around people who love us. We don't want to be around people who doesn't love us, And so it's natural. It's natural for the sentient beings to be attracted by loving kindness. And I think that is one of the reasons why everyone in the world with all different political views, with all different religions, with all different styles, most people like the Lama because of his loving kindness. They can feel that energy, and that is nothing more than that. I think I might have shared, I think one time, I think that is also in the Art of the Joy book. Desmond Tutu, Bishop Desmond Tutu kind of make he teasing Dalai Lama, they like to tease each other. And he says, you are like a rock star, you attract so many hundreds people come to listen to your teachings and that with your broken English. He said, with your broken English, so many, you attract like more than like those rock stars. So many people come to listen to you and with your broken English. And I don't remember exact word, but something like, and not because you are so intelligent. Also, he says something like that. But because of your compassion, because of your compassions. everyone's come to listen to you because of your loving kindness and compassion, and that is the power of loving kindness and compassion that attract so many beings. And there are many stories, meditators, when they are meditating in the caves with so much loving kindness, compassion, where even Tome Sangbo that we are discussing on the Sunday, and there was story that even some of the aggressive animals started to stay around him and become a very non-violent. There are many stories like that, tigers and other kind of, and so that seems to there are a lot of stories around that how it happens. Since even the victors defeat the horse of Mara by the force of love, it becomes the best protections and so forth. So the Buddha, before his enlightenment, the victor here meaning to the Buddhas, and when he was attacked by internal and external Maras, he conquered both internal and external Maras through loving kindness. And so loving kindness is the best way to protect. And His Holiness Dalai Lama always share stories, or he says he often shared that. He said he get a lot of requests from many people saying if he can help, because they feel they have been some people come in who say they have been harmed by some kind of spirit, They feel like they have been harmed by spirit, and so on. And His Holiness said, sometimes he feel almost like helpless. But he tried to meditate on loving kindness, compassion towards whatever spirit that might be harming, and that. And through that, cultivating loving kindness and compassion, and then through that communicating them, requesting them not to harm, and that. And he said, it seems to help many people. And so in that way, is able to protect yourself or others from being harmed by certain like that kind of energies by cultivating compassion and loving kindness and compassion. And in many teaching, it says, some of those spirits have certain even more stronger power than ourselves, ability to feel and see the mind of others. So when they see someone having compassion and loving them, just like ourselves, when we feel someone love us, we don't want to hurt them. We don't want to harm them, And it's a natural, whether it's an animal, whether it's a human beings, or whether it's a spirit, whatever, when they feel the compassion, they want to help. They don't want to harm. And therefore that become the best protections from external harms like that. And of course, that is the best harm. I mean, that is the best protections. The love is best protection from the harm of our own anger, hatred, which is the worst. I think that is the worst harm that can be done, much more worse harm than harm done by external things. Because with external harm, it can hurt our physically, but not necessarily our mind. But with anger and hatred, it disturb and destroy our mental happiness, and then destroy virtues which were created in the past, create more negative karma, and all of that, so much harm. And the way to protect ourselves from such damage and such harm is loving kindness, cultivating loving kindness. And then in terms of the practice itself, actually, the stage of meditation on love are to be respectively meditate initially on love for your friend. So just like we spoke about the last time with the equanimity. With equanimity, we start with the more neutral persons, and then the friends or relative, and then enemy, and then all sentient beings. And so here, it's slightly different, but same kind of way, but the object is like, the first, we start with someone who is very close to you, okay? Whoever you feel most close, okay? Your family, friends, you try to cultivate loving kindness to them because it's more easier. It's more easier to cultivate loving kindness to someone we are very close to, which we feel very close to, And by reflecting, contemplating some of the struggle that they are going through, and therefore, because of the struggle that they are going through, they lack a certain level of happiness, and so trying to, and then cultivating a strong wish to see them in that happiness, and then happiness of liberation and fully enlightenment, And once you have done that, then for neutral persons, more stranger, neutral, which you are not so close, neither you have any kind of bad relationship, neither you dislike or hate, so neutral person. And then for enemies, which is the most difficult. And then again, again, reminding ourselves, even this enemy has been most kind mother, father, sibling, friends in the past. Again, remembering that one, and even in this life, just as we talked during the equanimity, enemy can become a friend, could become a best friend. Nothing is permanent, and not only that, then that person, just like ourselves, want to be happy, but that person is struggling to have a happiness, samsaric happiness and beyond samsaric happiness, contaminated happiness and non-contaminated happiness. So they lack not only the non-contaminated happiness, but also contaminated happiness or samsaric happiness they lack. And when you see that, and then you can feel the loving kindness for them, wishing them to have happiness. And then once you have done, then for all sentient, then you include all sentient beings. And within that, maybe if we want to go, we can go more slowly. Maybe we can go, then that all human beings, then all animals, and then all other sentient beings, and then all sentient beings in that way. So again, sometimes, again, I often get a caution about how to meditate. And here we are explaining the meditation method, how to meditate, okay? So there is something more special than what we are learning here. And so just like here, sometimes we study, but then again, later you ask, but how to meditate? Okay, so here it is very clearly explained, how to meditate, starting with trying to cultivate loving kindness, starting with someone easier, your family, relative, and then to neutral, and then to enemy, and then all sentient beings. And is really trying to bring that feeling of loving kindness, In order to bring that feeling of loving kindness, we have to reflect, contemplate, and try to feel them wanting to be happy, but while they want to be happy, but they lack that happiness. And so when you see that, and then maybe you can feel loving kindness. The way in which to meditate on love is as follows. Just as the compassion arises when you reflect again and again on how sentient beings have suffering of sufferings, such as suffering of suffering, or other the 3 suffering, 6 suffering, 8 suffering. Likewise, you should reflect again and again, on how sentient beings lack contaminated, which is samsaric happiness, and uncontaminated, non-samsaric happiness, such as the happiness of liberation, fully enlightenment, and on the way in which they are devoid of happiness. So the more you reflect, the more you contemplate, the more you feel for that. Once you have familiarized yourself with this, the wish for them to encounter happiness will arise natural. So when you really feel, even though they wish to be happy, but they lack all those different levels of happiness. And when you really feel it, when you understand and when you really feel it, then the wish to see them, wish them to have happiness and cause of happiness will come naturally. So that's in addition, having considered the various kind of happiness, which I gave some examples, okay, you will then provide sentient being with them. And then we can think of wishing them to have those happiness, and again, as how wonderful if they have that happiness, how may they have that happiness and cause of happiness. May I be able to lead them to that happiness and cause of happiness. And please, so you can use that, the verses as a tool to feel it, and that is the Lord of the prayers are like that. I think it was one of the great Kongdang Rinpoche, one of the great Tibetan Lama. He said that he said it's like the word is like a can that old persons use, okay? And the meaning is like the person who walks. So you use, the persons use the cane for able to walk properly. So we use the words, those prayers, to really feel the meaning of the words. So that is how the prayer is, Lord of the prayer. So, and so we can use those words as a tool to really feel it, loving kindness. So then next, the compassions. Second, the observed object of compassions are sentient beings who suffer due to any of the 3 kind of the suffering, So the suffering of change, and all pervasive sufferings, or 6 sufferings, 8 sufferings, especially, and especially the suffering of all pervasive. And the aspect of the compassion, its aspect of the thought is, if only they were to free from those suffering, may they be free from them, and I will free them from them. And again, same way, And there are certain different verses, slightly different verses you find. And you can use any of those different praise verses that you feel more strongly connect. Or you can make up your own verses as well, It is not necessary that we have to use exact praise verses. The point is generally, again, as I mentioned, loving kindness, trying to cultivate how wonderful, great if they could have happiness, if they could be free from suffering and cause of suffering. May they be free and then cultivating even stronger wish, stronger attitude. May they be free from suffering and cause of sufferings. and then cultivating even more stronger and sense of responsibility and stronger attitude, I myself will free them from suffering, cause of suffering, and then please Guru Deity bless me to be able to do that. And so we can use those that we find in 4 immeasurable verses, the more longer extensive versions that you find. We can use those, or you can use short one too. And the sequence of meditations is to meditate on compassion for your friend, relative first, and then for neutral, and for your enemies, and then for all sentient beings of 10 directions. So again, similarly, like that is mentioned, the sequence is same it was mentioned loving kindness. Same way, it is easy to have compassion for someone who is very close to us. So we start with that. And then next, once you have compassion for that, and then we try to have compassion to more neutral persons. And then to enemy, which is more difficult. And once you have enemy, then all sentient beings. And again, as I mentioned, we can do for first all human beings, all animals, and then all other sentient beings in that way. Or, if people struggles to have compassion about themselves, then if someone has struggled to have a compassion for themselves, then first you try to do with someone whom you have more easier to have compassion, someone, your friends, families, and then you can have compassion for yourself. You visualize yourself in front of yourself, and who is just one of sentient beings who do not wish suffering, but who continue to suffer so much, and who needs the help, just like any other sentient beings. And so through that, you can cultivate compassion for oneself. If we use this same for self-compassion, if some people have struggled with self-compassion, using that also can be helpful. Now, then, in some of the others, Lam-Rim commentaries, you find also sometimes sequences might change. Sometimes it says for certain individuals, and for even some same individual, for some time, it might be beneficial to think of, let's say, animal that's going to be slaughtered. Imagining that. If you imagine the animal that is going to be slaughtered, maybe you can feel compassion easily. And so you start with that, and then you start with other sentient beings. Or we can use, sometimes we see in the news, or sometimes we see, in certain countries, when there is a disasters, or sometimes when there is a war, young children, innocent young children being exposed to such extreme pain and suffering, where we can, when we see that pain and suffering, so easy to feel the compassion, in those such circumstances and with such individuals. So again, the point is trying to cultivate compassion towards an object that is most easier to have the compassion. That is the main thing. Okay, whatever object we can use to cultivate compassion or loving kindness, whichever we feel more easier when we think of someone, certain situation, something which make us to have compassion so easily manifesting, arising, and we try to do that, where you don't struggle so much, where you don't have to push yourself so much, where you don't have to force yourself so much to feel the compassion. When you think of that, it just naturally arises. And so that is So that is the main point why you have those different sequences where in different Lam-Rim or different teaching, you find in some way it says like here, starting with your friends, relative. In some it says starting with someone, animal being slaughtered, because for some people that will be more easy to cultivate, to arise on compassion. Or some we can use such as I mentioned, you know, disasters, natural disasters, especially or in the war, and especially with the children's, you know, it will be more easier, and that innocent, those children who are in this such a pain and suffering. And you know, also same like in Tonglen, as you find, you know, also sometimes in some you can start with a hell ram, hungry ghost ram, animal ram, starting with the most intense sufferings, and that. So the starting point, the sequences can be from anywhere for different individuals where they feel more easier to cultivate the loving kindness and the compassion. Okay, so. The main point of meditation, that sequences, this gradual meditation equanimity, though. So we talk about equanimity, you know, then in this, after equanimity, recognizing all sentient beings and mother, then after that, remember the kindness, and then repaying the kindness, and then love, and the compassion, in which you classify object as developed by Acharya Kamalashila, following the Abhidharma Sutra. So it is the sequences that they explain in that Kamalashilas, you know. And this is very important point. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa making a very important point here. He is clarifying. This is a very important point, the ways Kamalashila explained there, that kind of sequences. Because if from the start you train in observing sentient beings in general without dividing them into specific categories, as I explained, 3 different categories, okay? It will seem as if equanimity and so forth, such as loving kindness, compassion, have arisings. But when you then think of friends and so forth, one by one, it will appear they have not arisen for any of them. For example, you know, when we think of equanimity for all sentient beings in general, without going specific category like that, it feels like we can feel equanimity towards everyone. But then when you think of your friend, then you are attached to it. And when you think of your enemy, you still have bitterness, anger. And so when you go individual, then you understand that equanimity has not developed. But when we, at the very beginning, when generalized, it seems it is like that. Same with loving kindness, compassions. If we don't go specific like that, when we think may all sentient beings have happiness and cause of happiness, and may all sentient beings free from suffering, cause of suffering, we try to feel it, we feel that way, and then we think of someone you have conflict, and then you can't wish them happiness, and you find struggles to see them free from suffering, and to have a compassion and love, you know. And then not that person, not this person, not these persons, you know. Then maybe a few millions of peoples. Even just among human beings, forget about all other sentient beings, even among human beings, we cannot develop compassion for all human beings. Not only all human beings, not even in all the person in this country. And then we see that we have not really developed that kind of true compassion or loving kindness. And so that is the very important why it is. Sometimes we feel if we can do with all sentient beings from the beginning, it takes less time, isn't it? It takes less time. It seems more easier, less struggles. When we go by each categories, it takes more time, and there's more struggle, because when it comes to the end, when it comes to the stranger, we already have little struggles with that. And when it comes to enemy, we really struggles to really feel the compassion and the loving kindness. And so then sometimes it feel, if we just do generous, we feel it's just nice feeling, you know. And sometimes we get stuck there. It's just that nice feeling. Whereas if we go specific, sometimes it might not be so nice feeling. It can be struggles. But that is the only way to, if we really want to cultivate and develop and generate such unconditional, unbiased, impartial loving kindness, compassion towards all sentient beings. This should be the way, that kind of sequences going through this category is very important, you know. On the other hand, if you experience a change in your mentality towards them one by one, as explained above, and then extend to many, then at the end, you observe them in general and maintain those, you will arise purely regardless of who is observed, whether group or each one singly. And is the point, you know, because all sentient beings, you know, all sentient beings fit in one of those three categories. Either they are close to us, friends, relatives, something we have good relationship, or whether they are more like neutral persons or someone we dislike or have conflict, whether we call it enemy or not. So there is no sentient beings which is not included in any of those categories. And so when we have gone through that three categories, that then when we extend to all sentient beings, then it becomes easier to maintain it, because they all fall in one of those three categories. And we have been able to overcome with each of those categories. And so once you are able to develop that, then once we are able to develop loving kindness, compassion on the basis of such training and practice, then whether you think of individual or whether you think of individual singularly or whether you think as a group, you will be able to develop loving kindness, compassion without any difficulties and purely in that way. And so that is where it's important. The way to meditate is in terms of suffering. That will explain when considering how the sentient beings who have been our mothers are falling into existence and are experiencing general and specific sufferings. And so, as Lama Tsongkhapa already kind of explained a little bit of when he explained about loving kindness, how to, so again, in order to compassion, then we have to reflect and contemplate on the suffering of sentient beings. Again and again and again, reflecting, contemplating, and feeling the suffering of sentient beings again and again. And the more you contemplate, the more you reflect, the more you feel their pain and suffering, and then the compassion arises naturally. The wish to see them free from suffering and cause of suffering will arise naturally. The compassion will arise naturally. So, and then, you know, in terms of the suffering, you know, first we start with suffering of suffering, because it is so obvious. It's easy to get the suffering, to feel the pain, to feel the compassions, suffering of sufferings. Whether someone is sick or obvious pain and sufferings. Okay. So we can use, you know, individual suffering of 6 realms and general sufferings, such as 8 suffering, 6 sufferings, as well as the 3 types of suffering, suffering of change, suffering of all pervasive, that we went in during the middle scope, very extensive, all of that. Bring that here now for compassion, when we are trying to develop compassion. So again, and thinking, and especially first thinking of suffering, because it's so obvious, so it's easy. And then not only suffering of change, and suffering of all pervasive, especially suffering of all pervasives. Yes, please. I think it depends on individual. If people get overwhelmed by the suffering and they don't know how to deal with that, I think it's better to kind of keep away from that. But if it doesn't overwhelm you, but it actually helps you to see the pain and suffering in the world, and it helps you to cultivate, to develop compassion, then that wouldn't be problems. So it depends on individual, and it's the same, not only with the compassion, even like some people mind are very much disturbed by the news when they see, they don't know how to handle properly, and they get very disturbed. And some people, they have certain skills, way of doing it, that they don't get so disturbed. And so depending on how we are able to respond, how we respond, depending on that, then yeah, we can decide whether it is, if it is overwhelm you and make you kind of down and depressed, then it is not a good. So therefore, that shouldn't be the case. And so therefore, then maybe in those cases, maybe it should be, it might be more helpful to kind of keep away from those news, So yeah, so we're talking about, so I was talking about especially the suffering of all pervasives. In order to have these great compassions, because the suffering, you see sometime, but not all the time with all sentient beings, okay? Sometimes we have health challenges, and suffering we can see very clearly. Sometimes we struggles with many other things, and suffering is very obvious, we can see that. But sometimes we don't have that suffering in certain time in our life, and also all peoples around the world, some. And so then when we don't see that, then we might not feel compassion for them. And so therefore, understanding, even though they don't experience suffering, they are experiencing suffering of change. In some situation, in some realms, even though they are not experiencing suffering of change, but they are definitely experiencing suffering of all pervasive. In all 6 realms, all the time. All sentient beings, all sentient beings in the 6 realms, are suffering of all pervasive suffering all the time. So if we really understand that, then we will feel, then it will allow to feel compassion for all sentient beings all the time. And so that understanding is crucial. And to really feel that, first we need to have understanding with ourselves. That means as long as our life is kind of under the control and influence and driven by delusion and contaminated karma, that itself is suffering. When we become slave, when we become prisoner and a slave of our own delusion and our own contaminated karma actions, that itself is suffering. It doesn't have to be such an obvious suffering to suffer. And so when you understand that then that will give us the space to feel compassion to each and every sentient being and all the time, because all sentient beings are experiencing, even though some of them might not be experiencing suffering, even though some of them are not experiencing suffering of change, but they're all suffering, experience the suffering of all pervasive sufferings, and not only all of them all the time. And so that is And the measure of arising of compassion taught in stages of meditation, 1 by Kamalashila. You know, at the point when the compassion, that is the aspect of constant desire to remove the suffering of all beings, as if your beloved child was unhappy, operates naturally in you spontaneous and operate in according with your own nature, it is the complete. Thereby it often the name great compassions. So, you know, just as for the mothers, when they have the only child, the only precious child, when the child is suffering, you know, and the mother has spontaneous, naturally feeling to remove the suffering of that child, you know, without any effort, just natural, spontaneously. That way, when we have that, when we see the suffering of sentient beings, and when we have a effortless, spontaneous, a strong wish, attitude to remove them from the suffering and cause of suffering, when that comes very spontaneous and naturally without any effort, then that is when we have cultivated the great compassions. When that happened to all sentient beings, you know, so that is. So, if you think, if you are not sure whether you have cultivated great compassion or not, this is the way you can evaluate. Okay, and see if we are in that state, if we have that kind of spontaneous, effortless a wish, compassion, wish to remove the suffering and cause suffering of others, of any sentient beings. And so, yeah. Thus, if compassion towards all sentient beings naturally arise to the extent that it arises mother when the child she loved with her heart suffer, it is said to be the fully qualified great compassion. By this, the measure for arising great love should be known. So also, it's the same when you have this, the wish to lead all sentient beings to happiness and cause happiness effortlessly, spontaneously, towards all sentient beings, any sentient beings, then that is when you have developed the loving kindness. So I guess maybe we will have to stop here today. Made an extraordinary attitude. Okay. Thank you. So any questions?